Welcome, everyone. My name is Soraya Dean. We are the American Muslim Multifaith Women's Empowerment Council, a coalition of women, and I run the Muslim Women Speakers Bureau for the coalition. Today, we have an incredible discussion. We're going to speak to a woman who has spoken with over 200 Palestinians. There's so much curiosity in our world about who is the Palestinian. And we have with us Anila Ali, who's the founder of the American Muslim Multifaith Women's Empowerment Council, who will speak to us this morning. There's Farhana Khurshid, who's an executive board member of Ammwec and also runs the New England Bangladesh Foundation. And we have with us our beloved Sheikh Musa Drame from all the way from New York, who is a galvanizing voice for us on Muslim-Israel dialogue today. I will take the liberty of introducing Amira at length because this Friday forum has been happening every Friday. And we share very important topics. We don't say we have all the answers, but we are committed to exploring solutions. I will introduce Amira and then we'll go right into the program. Now, Dr. Amira Halperin is a scholar. She's a public speaker and former investigative journalist. Her pioneering research on Palestinian community in the UK situates her as a world expert in the areas of Middle Eastern politics, refugees, and new media technologies. Based on her lengthy research on global terrorism, she delivered speeches at the UN, the European Parliament, and the Israeli Parliament. Currently, she serves as a senior research associate at the Britain-Israel Communications and Research Centre, BICOM, in London. She's a member of the ISGAP Oxford community and a media expert of Forum Dvora, Women in Foreign Policy and National Security. She completed a PhD at the University of Westminster, UK in 2014. Welcome, Amira. Thank you for making your time. You're between conferences, I know, in Brussels. We really appreciate you. This forum will be in 3 parts. Amira will speak to us, then we will have the Sheikh, then Farhana and Anila, all of us speaking, sharing their perspectives on the topic, and then we will open it out to questions, and the panelists will engage each other. And I may also pose questions, especially to Amira. So let's begin with Amira. She has a little time. She's between conferences, as I said. Amira, you wrote to me when we spoke also, you said you interviewed 200 Palestinians across the United Kingdom in their homes, in their mosques, men, women, children from Gaza and the West Bank who reside in the UK. And you even interviewed even those affiliated with Hamas and Fatah, even Gazans who arrived for UK for a brief visit. So I have 2 questions for you, Amira. I'll pose it together. What did you discover about the links between the Palestinians in the UK and Gaza and the West Bank? And 2, your position as an Israeli interviewing Palestinians. Was there trust and was there willingness to talk and share?
Thank you. Your first question refers to the links between the Palestinians at Gaza and the West Bank, isn't it?
Yeah, in the UK, yes.
Yes. Okay. So the Palestinian community in the UK is a very big community and it's scattered across the UK. So they are not located in one place. And also the people from Gaza and the West Bank are separated and live in different locations. Now, if you ask me about the political aspect of the Gazans comparing to the West Bank residents, I would say that there are similarities and differences that I spotted between the two. And to give the background, how do I know about this is exactly like you stated, because I've been there, I saw them in their natural environment. So when I interviewed Hamas activists or Hamas people that are affiliated with Hamas, I knew that this is the case because I've been invited to attend conferences of Hamas, for example, in London, or you know, if it was the West Bank, similarly. So we see that the aim of both the West Bank and Gaza's Palestinians is the establishment of a Palestinian state. But the way that they look at it, the establishment of a Palestinian state, looking at it from the perspective of Hamas compared to the West Bank, is very much different, because Hamas are, as we all know, especially following October 7th, have been designated, this organization has been designated as a terrorist organization. So we have a problem here with looking at the differentiation between really political goals to terrorism. So how they want to pursue this aspiration, how they want to achieve a Palestinian state, this is the important thing to understand. So for example, when I attended Hamas places, I really can see it with my eyes, how the politicization, how really the resistance to Israel is so strong, even when you look at their their monuments where they live, and the posters and political engagements that are influencing their daily life experiences. And relating to the second question, this is one of the major issues that is very important in the context of my research. My research is a research that was created in order to really gain impact. This was my aim. I didn't want to interview the Palestinians because of any political orientation or any political reason. I really wanted to work as a professional academic to deliver the message of the Palestinians in their own voice, but written by a non-Palestinian Jewish scholar. As you said, it was very difficult to achieve this goal because of the climate between the Palestinians and the Israelis, the very difficult toxic climate and hostility, of course. But the way to do it was to establish a collaboration which aims to really promote understanding and scholarly rather than to provoke, which means really listening and providing evidence and testimonies of the Palestinians as they say it. Of course, the problems didn't end when I did my PhD and completed it 10 years ago. On the contrary, I mean, the problems continue even after the successfully completed this research, and especially after October 7th, being Israeli scholar who is focusing on research of the other side. So this is a major problem. And if we talk of solutions, I have in mind many solutions that I also wrote down and advice to different parliamentarians about these solutions, but there are many solutions which I think at the moment are not being implemented, not by Western government, not by leadership of universities across Western countries, and not by schools. Even schools where young students are being educated are really not in a position to tackle this problem because of different reasons, like trying to accommodate different views of people, which doesn't really lead to any achievement here.
So Amira, you spoke about the goals of Hamas and the people in the West Bank being different. Could you tell us a little bit more about that? Because we put all the Palestinians into one as we try to understand this. And Hamas has a level of control in West Bank, right?
Yeah. So I agree with you, and I feel that the major problem, and I really feel and know that the major problem, like you said, that people don't know to differentiate between the West Bank and Gaza. So the West Bank and Gaza are geographically two separate territories. whereas Hamas is controlling Gaza since 2007, and Fatah has been controlled by the Palestinian Authority, and Fatah and the Palestinian Authority are controlling the West Bank. But of course, there are links between Gaza and the West Bank, and also links between Gaza, the West Bank, and other Palestinian communities in the diaspora, like in the UK. There are close ties between them. And the important thing maybe to explain here is the fact that Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank are defining themselves as refugees. So if you hear in the news the story of displacement and the story of the Palestinian refugees, one must understand that this is not a very straightforward story. It's a very complex story because the word refugees in the Palestinian context in Gaza and the West Bank is very different than a Palestinian, for example, that is escaping the war in Syria. Even the Palestinians that reside here in the UK, where I did my research, and they are very well established in the UK, they would still define themselves as refugees because they say that they didn't leave their home country because they believe that their home country has been taken by the Israelis many years ago. So the UNHCR definition of refugees is basically someone who is fleeing war. In the Palestinian context, it's very limited to a period of time of 1946 to 1948, and it says that this is the time when Palestinians lost their homes. In terms of comparison between the West Bank and Gaza and the narrative, there is a problem that is common to both communities, which is the problem of the Palestinian narrative as a whole. The Palestinian narrative as a whole is a very distorted narrative, unfortunately, in many cases using by extremists, not necessarily all Palestinians, of course, but especially after October 7th, this distortion of history and facts. So, for example, in the UK, there is the head of the delegation to the UK, and he is very educated, like many of Hamas people that I interviewed. But from the other hand, he's very radical, and like many other that I interviewed. And
are you referring to Zumlat, Hussam Zumlat?
Hussam Zumlat, which I also interviewed him, yes.
Yeah.
And he is basically emphasizing the fact that they want democracy, and he's really using this word democracy. Now, how can you actually say I want democracy, where in one hand you say I want democracy, but on the other hand, you can't condemn October 7th atrocities and massacre, and you can't condemn Hamas and so on. So, and you say that the Nakba wasn't the establishment of the state of Israel, whereas there was a displacement. Now, I'm not talking about him. I'm talking generally. Many Palestinians would say that the Nakba, for example, is when the Israelis committed genocide towards the Palestinians, and they're talking about occupation of many years. Whereas Nakba is in Arabic, it means, yes, it's the catastrophe of the Palestinians. But there was a political process at the time where Israel was established and the Palestinians were displaced. But it's not like many would say today, the Palestinians were displaced and Israel committed crimes. No, something happened there very important. The country was established, which we can't ignore. And this was part of the process. Now, one point that I would like to just, maybe I'm talking too early about this, but it just, when we started speaking today and when we talked yesterday that we have today the opportunity to discuss between us, I was just thinking that I can't speak with you without talking about what is really urging now at the moment, maybe in one sentence, that with the hope of the release of the living hostages and maybe the missed opportunity in these negotiations by not releasing all the dead hostages. We still have a problem there. We have a very delicate point of time now where, for example, our prime minister here in the UK, and I'm saying our because he's my prime minister, I'm a British citizen as well, and I see him as my prime minister as well. And I see him responsible for me as being Jewish here in the UK, in Europe, for us as a community in Europe. And he said this week that his goal is really to tackle extremism. And he said it very clearly that he wants to tackle extremism and hate. From the other hand, we received these messages yesterday talking about the forthcoming football match in Birmingham, where Aston Villa, against where Israel should come to the UK, Israel fans should come to the UK, and now the police is not allowing them to come because of forthcoming threats, expectation that there something would happen. So I would have to say that this is a very urgent matter for people to hear and understand that this, if you emphasized in the beginning of your introduction, talking about solutions. So I've been working on this, like you said, on lengthy research of terrorism, both with policymakers and media and universities. And I can tell you very clearly that not allowing the fans to come over to the UK is not a solution, because if the government acknowledges the fact that there are extremists, that there is a threat, they should do something to mitigate the risks online and offline, because the fact that they will not come here, people from Israel will not come here, doesn't mean that this extremist will not take another path, to throw a bomb or carry out a terrorist attack against Jewish, but not only Jewish. It can affect also, of course, people in the UK, right? As we all know, bombs do not differentiate or distinguish between Jewish and non-Jewish people. So when you just said that we are going to talk today, I just felt that this is very important to emphasize that at the moment there is a room for extremism after October 7th in Europe, in the US, and counterterrorism policies are not fully implemented. And there are many solutions, right? We don't have time to speak about solutions, but this is definitely not a solution. I think this is actually, on the contrary, it gives victory to the extremists. It gives them leverage to say, we can continue to do what we do.
Right. Thank you, Amira. I was lamenting also after October 7th, we failed to shift the narrative, to isolate Hamas. We are still in the pre-October 7th time where Hamas is getting away everything. And as you said, when leaders like Hassam talks about democracy from one side of the mouth and from the other side emboldens the extremism, this has to be called out. Thank you. We'll get back to you. We are going to talk about radicalization in the US campuses and the terrorists released. It's a huge issue that you've said you will talk about, and the reconciliation and the refugee crisis we spoke. I'm going to now Anila. Anila, you heard Amira, and you heard her say that very clearly, despite all the challenges, she is respectful of her government, which is what we don't see on the streets here in the United States. There's so much hate and animosity taught to our people and the Muslim community in particular. Would you have a question for Amira, Anila? And
I do. I have a few comments as well. Welcome, Amira.
Please do.
I think that the Labour Party, with its Corbynization, exported its anti-Semitism into the Democratic Party in the United States. In fact, a few years ago, the Democratic Party hired the publicist or the strategist from the UK Democratic Party, and then the Democratic Party here went far left. So we've had major disasters when it comes to combating anti-Semitism, getting out the right narrative, the narrative of truth. But I felt the same when I was talking to Palestinians in, in the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, and Gaza in 2018. And I felt that, when they opened up to me, because I was a Muslim, they started telling me that this land is theirs, it doesn't belong to the Jews. And for me, that was problematic because of my faith and what the Quran says. And then I would like talk to them, but I felt that they had been so indoctrinated over the years to believe in this ideology that the Jews have no historical, connection to that land, that I started like saying, no, brother, no, this is wrong. In the Quran, Allah says Moses and your people and children of Israel, Yaqub alayhi salam, these are all our Islamic beliefs. And so they were very important to me. And that's when, I felt that the Muslim world and much of the left in UK, left in America, has been brainwashed by that radical ideology that Palestinians are the only ones that have, and Golda Meir was Palestinian. She says it in her own video. So I feel that a lot of people, in fact, in West Bank, when we were there, we went to a think tank, and it was largely, the Muslims there. They said, we have found our finding is that there is no possibility of a two-state solution. That was in 2018. That was the people in Ramallah telling us that after their extensive research. My question to you is, the ceasefire is very frail. As you know, some of the hostages, the deceased hostages, the ones murdered by Hamas, have not been returned. And also, there is a denial now that Hamas is killing its own people. It's executing people, but we see no outrage. So how are we ever going to tackle or re-educate the world on this narrative that they have completely absorbed?
Thank you. There are few points that must be remembered in order to educate people. But first of all, when we talk about education, we must start from the young age, because, just last week, my daughter, she's 16 and a half, she showed me the social media that she's using, and her classmates or, young people the same age are already using social media to deliver the same messages of hate that we see being delivered by adults. So this is very worrying. And that's when we talk about education, we need to start from young age. That's first of all. Second, the one line that all of us need to remember in the world, that it doesn't relate to state. We need to put aside the political questions of statehood, or who was there first, who was not there first, and all other political questions. Put it aside for a second when people talk about the war in Gaza. And people need to first bear in mind very clearly that Hamas is a terrorist organization. And Israel is fighting against terrorism, and the West is fighting against terrorism, against extremism, against the Muslim Brotherhood, against Iran, against these forces. Now, when you talk about what is happening now after Hamas released the hostages and how they are killing the clans in Gaza, this is really not surprising, isn't it? Because during the war, we know that Hamas was being blamed for looting humanitarian aid, for UNRWA's, we know that also UNRWA's was related to October 7th. And this needs to be very clear that Hamas is in government since 2007. But it's the paradox between being a government and a terrorist organization. This is exactly the problem, because there is no opposition to Hamas. We have to remember that in order to start, like Trump is aiming to do, to start a new government, First of all, it would take time because Hamas is dominating this area since 2007. People are used to Hamas. The infrastructure is Hamas. UNRWA's schools, everything, the infrastructure is built under Hamas. And the people from Gaza support, many of them would support Hamas. So I think this is one of the problems that people don't understand. And therefore, we need to teach, we need to educate them, we need to explain, and we need to tell the stories.
Thank you, Amira. Because of the lack of time, I'm going now to Sheikh. Sheikh, you are somebody who strongly advocates for the understanding the theological importance of Muslims to have a different understanding of Holy Land and why we should lead the fight of anti-Semitism, we Muslims. And in absorbing the perspectives shared by Amira, could you speak to us to that problem?
Absolutely. First of all, Assalamu alaikum, salam, and good morning. And I'm grateful to be here, and I'm grateful, to listen to, the speech of the scholar concerning very, very important topic in the Muslim world, which is the Holy Land. I would say 99% of the problems concerning the Holy Land is about ignorance. The fact is, Jerusalem, Masjid Aqsa to be specific, is made into what it is not in Islam. And it is done specifically to tie the Holy Land to the Muslim world, because if you don't connect it, then what's the use of Muslims from different parts of the world regarding, the fight for Palestinian state to be their fight? Because there are many, many problems throughout the world concerning Muslims. The only reason why we singularly focus on this issue is because of the attachment that is made concerning Masjid Aqsa and Jerusalem, which doesn't exist in Islam. Let's begin with the establishment of Israel, 1948. Even after October 7, immediately after October 7, the rallies, they started saying, we're rallying because not October 7, but this started in 1948. So they are, the quest is to delegitimize the existence of Israel and detach the connection of the Israelis to their homeland, and to strongly connect the Holy Land to the Muslim world, which does not exist. Now, as Anila alluded, number one, if we deem Israel to be a new country, 1948, yet we have our own holy book that narrates Moses' commandment to his people. And our holy book came over 1,400 years ago. The question that needs to be asked is, which Holy Land was Moses describing? Is it the Holy Land in New Jersey or Washington, D.C. or China? So that's number one. That means the state of Israel precedes 1948. The connection of Jews to their homeland is thousands of years in existence. Many imams, and I want you to test this. I want you to test some of the biggest Islamic scholars. I want you to test them about the existence of Masjid Aqsa. Number one, they don't even know that the Dome of the Rock is different from Masjid Aqsa. That's number one. Number two, they firmly believe that what we call Masjid Aqsa now in Jerusalem existed during the lifetime of Prophet Muhammad. Imams, I'm not talking about regular Muslims, I'm talking about Islamic scholars, believe that Masjid Aqsa, existed. Why? Because they made a mistake in misinterpreting an ayah from Quran, which I want all of you to check. The ayah never ever said what Muslims are saying. Muslims are now celebrating, Muhammad being raised to heavens, from Mecca to Jerusalem being raised. Nowhere in the Quran that is said. No prophet in the Quran was raised. It is the angels, Jibril, that come down. Therefore, what we now celebrate, we do so many things because, Muhammad came from Mecca, go to Jerusalem, not in the Quran. Not Islam is fabricated. It is Jibril that come. Because number one, Muhammad did not bring prayer. Muhammad did not bring fasting. Muhammad did not bring pilgrimage. Muhammad did not bring the belief of one God. Muhammad did not bring zakat. None of these Islamic practices Muhammad brought as original. Because if you go to Quran, chapter 46, verses 9, 46 verses 9, it clearly said to Muhammad, tell your people you didn't bring anything new. You are telling them the commandments that came before you and given to the prophets. You are rehearsing. So therefore, the idea that Muhammad was raised to heaven and therefore God gave him many prayers and then Moses told him, oh, this is too many prayers, your people cannot handle it, negotiated, and finally 5 prayer is a fabrication. And I'll be more than happy to share more details about how that fabrication, copied from Christian versions and whatever, nothing to do with Islam. So therefore, that ayah they said went to heaven, not in the Quran. Muhammad did not go to any heaven. Number 2, Quran never said Jerusalem. From Masjid al-Haram to Masjid Aqsa. A lot of scholars saying Masjid Aqsa can very well be, the Medina, Medina, rather than Jerusalem or anywhere else. It could very well be Medina, because all we know is that Muhammad migrated from Mecca to Medina. No other place that we know of. And the very first mosque after the Kaaba, the very, very first mosque after the Kaaba was built in East Africa. And then the very first mosque for Muhammad was built in Medina. Masjid, the masjid still exists. All of you who went to Hajj or Umrah, you went to the, to the masjid. I think it's a masjid Baqi or whatever, Masjid Quba, the very first mosque. So now you have the Kaaba, you have the mosque in East Africa, you have Masjid Quba, and then you have Prophet's Mosque. These are 4 masajids. All of a sudden they say the 3rd holiest mosque in Islam is Masjid Aqsa, which did not even exist, which we never ever can verify Muhammad ever visited. And we know for certain Muhammad did not go to the heaven. We know for certain Muhammad did not bring prayer. So once we decode this misleading attachment, then we are more we're able to now say we're proud to have Mecca and Medina. We're proud to face, if you go to Quran chapter 2 verses 142, 145 and 149, chapter 2 verses 142, 145, 149, it clearly stated that Allah was testing the followers of Muhammad with their beliefs. That's why they used to pray just like facing where the Jewish people face. But Allah tests them now, changing the direction now to the Kaaba. Some follow Muhammad change, others whose beliefs were not strong, they left Islam. From that commandment until today, the attachment or the connection to Jerusalem doesn't exist as much as we want to make it. Jerusalem, in reality, is connected to Judaism. Now, there's a difference between the degree in which we give it and the fact that Palestinians, also have connection to it. I'm not denying the connection. I'm not denying their right for whatever they're fighting. I'm just saying that, the degree in which we attach, Holy Land and Jerusalem, to Islam does not exist. It is because we remove Quran from Islam and replace it with Hadith. And this Hadith, the biggest compiler of Hadith is Bukhari. Bukhari was born in Bukhara. Bukhari was born 174 years after the death of Muhammad. Bukhari was not Middle Eastern, was not Arab. And the first time we saw a book narrated, credited to Bukhari, also another 200 years, which means over 400 years. Of 400 after the death of Prophet Muhammad, we saw Bukhari. Now, let me give you a secret about Bukhari, the #1 compiler for this hadith. According to record, Bukhari compiled 600,000 hadiths. 600, one man, born 174 years after Muhammad's death, and the first book we saw came another 200 years, which means over 400 years, and compile one person in a lifetime 600 hadith, 600,000. Guess what happened? 99% were found to be inaccurate. 1%, and even the 1% now, which is 7,553, some scholars are now discounting, the 1%, they're discounting some of the hadith. All I'm saying is that we replace Quran, which is pro-Semitic, pro-Israel, tied Israelis to their homeland, and sanctify Jerusalem, in the views of Judaism. We replace it with anti-Semitic, anti-common sense, anti-Islam, anti-Quran, anti-everything, these fabricated hadith, and make that strong connection. And Muslims are dying because they firmly believe that, this mosque is the third holiest mosque. Doesn't exist anywhere in the Quran. It's only, make the connection so that Muslims will continue to die saying, oh, you touch, this mosque, and then you touch the anti-Islam because it's the third holiest mosque. Doesn't exist. So my advice is that we continue to do what we're doing. Once we lessen and enlighten the Muslim world that, number one, the masjid did not exist during the lifetime of Muhammad. I talked to an imam, he couldn't believe it. He has to debate me. He said, no, the masjid was there because Allah raised. And I said, where did Allah raise him? He read the ayah. I said, explain the ayah. He couldn't find it. He couldn't find it. That means that he was big surprise to him that the masjid was built over 70 years after the death of Muhammad. Muhammad, Quran never mentioned Muhammad ever going to Jerusalem. Quran never mentioned Muhammad raised to heavens and given prayer, because Quran said you didn't bring prayer. Prayer was here before you. All I'm saying is that let's continue on this, this educational thing, because everything is based on ignorance. Muslims are ignorant about the Holy Land, about Judaism, about their religion, and majority of the Muslim world are young generations. And these young generations are indoctrinated into anti-Semitism, anti-West, resistance, freedom fighter, because underdogs are loved and supported worldwide. Anywhere you find underdogs, people love them because people connected to them and their struggle. Majority of the Muslim world, if not the entire Muslim world, just came out of colonialism. And a lot of them came out of very, very brutal, colonial terrorists that done so many bad things and steal so much resources and build their nation to, from looting. Because of that, we use that now, and then we add Israel as part of that. Even though Israel is a victim, but we make Israel just like as evil as any other, empire that, did, what they did, including Muslim empires, by the way, because the reason why we lost Quran and replaced it with Hadith came from this Muslim empire. And I'll be more than happy to talk about how those, a lot of things, if you realize that it's not Islam, then you would say, wait a minute. what are we worshiping? I mean, because, they were very mischievous, leaders in the Muslim world in the beginning that,
Thank you.
needed to do
I
what
just
they did.
wanna-
And that is what we're practicing, not the
Thank
real
you,
Islam.
Sheikh. I'm just
Soraya.
wondering to this, as Amira listens, this basic level of education we Muslims badly need. And I'm wondering, with your connections and contacts with the Palestinian diaspora people in the UK, are they aware or will they be receptive? Because around the world, Muslims particularly, resist this kind of conversation and education. So I'll park there. Anila had a question, but please respond to that after Anila's question. Anila.
More than that, I have one of my favorite scholars is Mustafa Akyol, and he's a reformer scholar, and he's written that the Dome of the Rock's sanctity in Islam, it grew out of political and symbolic need rather than early Quranic interpretations and foundation, encouraging Muslims to understand it as a part of Islam's shared Abrahamic heritage rather than a site of exclusive Islam. And not only that, there was another scholar, Dr. Suleiman Murad, and that was like, quite a few hundred years ago. He also said the Dome of the Rock, it's symbolized Umayyad efforts to establish Jerusalem as a sacred Islamic center, not necessarily because of an original Quranic directive. And I also want to add to Sheikh Saab's interpretation that the custodian of the Holy Mosque, Muhammad bin Salman, stated clearly, he said 99% of the hadith are false.
Yeah.
So that is where we get our Islamic directive from. But Muslims, have to be educated about their own religion first and where it comes from. And then, we have
Thank you, Anila.
huge
Yes.
task.
Yes. Amira, so you meet the Palestinians. Tell us where they are. Are they able to receive this education? And before I go to Farhana, I also want you to answer. In 2025, the Labour government formally recognized Palestinian statehood during the war. Has that caused harm? Has that derailed the process? And the UK policies that are supportive of Israel in some instances further galvanizes the protest movement, because we have seen the most virulent protests and anti-Semitism coming from the United Kingdom. Amira.
First of all, like I said earlier, we know that Hamas said after October 7th and with the acknowledgement of the establishment of the Palestinian state, they said that the successful, they see it as a successful operation, they call it October 7th, that led to the fact that now there is a recognition in a Palestinian state. So talking about education, the first thing that people need to be educated about is history. And it's not only educating the Muslims, because we see that radicalization in Europe and the US is among many members of non-Muslim communities that are being influenced by these radical ideas. So there is a need to educate and to explain what does it mean Palestinian state and what are the geographical borders of Palestinian state. And like I said earlier, to shift the discussion from a Palestinian state to October 7th in the way that we want to explain to the world, not in the way that Hamas is saying the Palestinian state is linked to the successful operation of October 7th, but rather to explain what is a Palestinian state, what does it mean for the Palestinians themselves. And many Palestinians in Europe and in the US, of course, are not radical. They can help with education, and they can help to deliver, the most common claim is that you can always consult with the moderate, but this is really true because the moderate people do understand history and do understand these narratives and can really explain them. And when we talk about democracy, also it's very important to remember that we have two problems here. One, we talked about the problem of democracy in Gaza and the West Bank. We know it's not a democratic place at all. But we have to look also about democracy in Europe and in the US, and how democracy can be really implemented fully in these places. Because when you see that, for example, yesterday, there was a student from University of Oxford that shouted that Zionists should go to the ground, and he was allegedly shouting this, and he was arrested. So this is really the power of democracy, where you see that incitement to terrorism must not be allowed on campuses. Campuses are not only hub for Muslims, they are also, like I say, it's also, the radicalization is not only among Muslims. Many non-Muslims are being radicalized, like these students and others. And this is, unfortunately, maybe, I'm very cautious to say maybe the beginning of what we saw, that he has been arrested, because there is so much to do. And when students are calling for jihad, for example, there is a problem of interpretation, that people say it's open to interpretation, whereas we have to be very clear. What does it mean? We have to educate the people about the terminology, because the terminology being used in the Palestinian Authority itself, from what I learned from them, is very, very different from what the policies of Western countries are really want to achieve, because they talk about colonialization and genocide and Holocaust, and all these terms are being twisted. So someone really needs to take the role, and I think that this someone should be us, the educators, as well as governments, together in collaboration with governments.
So what was your sense, Amira? You met 200 Palestinians. Are they receptive to listen, learn, and change?
The Palestinians that I spoke with, and many of them are at the time were willing to change the perceptions after talking and learning about really the real history, the real ideas that are not based on fiction. It's very difficult, of course, after October 7th, but again, we must not surrender to extremism.
Yes,
there must be more education and more understanding about radicalization in our institutions in democratic countries.
Thank you. We say a mother's heart is a child's classroom. I personally am very interested in educating and engaging the mothers. I'll go now to Farhana. She wanted to talk to you about the book you wrote about how the Palestinians are using technology and the social media. Farhana?
Hi, Dr. Amira Halpern. Thank you for joining us this morning, probably evening at where you're at. I had a couple of questions for you. The book is I haven't read the full book. I ordered it. I'm looking forward to reading more in depth what you had to say. I have a few questions from the book, and I'm going to wrap it up with a third question, but they're small. How has this new media platform changed the way the Palestinian diaspora engages with their identity and commonality in the UK compared to the traditional form and media? And second one would be, what role do social media and digital storytelling play for shaping this public conception of Palestinian experience and UK and worldwide, I would say? And the third, the engaging question would be the influence all these social media and the war on terrorism threats the UK and the US. Because after October 7, it's like unleashing of higher rate of anti-Semitism and it's out in the open right now, what we saw on college campuses. The first, after October 7, through Ammwec, we hosted a first interfaith iftar, and Jewish community here in Massachusetts, where it's supposed to be the most liberal state, were scared to join the Muslim community. And that was like a awakening moment, that what they were feeling and what they're going through.
Thank you. When I did my research, it just started the process of integrating new media technologies into the daily life of the Palestinians. And this created a really, really significant impact for the Palestinians. It was really the first time when they could use technology and social media for purposes of receiving news, understanding about the world. But most important for them was at the time when I interviewed them, and they talked about the fact that they could tell their story in their own words. Because they said that before the development of new media technologies, people didn't hear about Gaza and the West Bank. And this was just an opportunity for them to tell their stories. And they really developed many blogs and social media websites, and were engaging in this storytelling. So then as the technology has developed further, of course, there were further opportunities, but also the same argument that you talked about, the third question that you asked about the negative aspect, how social media is influencing on terrorism and radicalization. And especially after October 7th, you see how people from different communities, even people that are very educated, are abusing social media for purposes of hate speech and the glorification of terrorism. So from one hand, we have, of course, the positive aspect that provides the Palestinian a platform for empowerment, and they were telling the stories of their families, and even few of them were busy with writing literature, but all of this has really dramatically changed after October 7th. It was problematic before October 7th, but after October 7th, it really changed. Yeah, it really changed dramatically. So I hear someone.
Thank you, Amira. You know, we are running out of
time. I think that I didn't hear maybe the second question that Anil asked. That
Farhana
asked, yes.
Okay, the second question was, what was the role of the social media digital story playing, shaping the public perception of the Palestinian experience in UK and overall? We have seen on hand that, there is positiveness and there's negativeness, as you mentioned, but how is that, the fabric of this is, a kind of stopping the peace process in the middle?
Online platforms are very open to radicalization, and the problem of regulation is very evident there, because the messages that you see online in terms of political mobilization in the UK, if we talk specifically about the UK, it's something that you see. It's you open the Facebook, for example. Just let's even look on one platform, which is Facebook. If you open Facebook, you have certain groups of Palestinians that are operating in the UK, and we have to remember that terrorism is a global issue. It's not a local issue. Hamas is not located merely in Gaza, not located merely in West Bank, and not threatening merely Israel. Hamas is a global organization. And the way Hamas has a very sophisticated social media network. They really know how to utilize the media for their own purposes. They use the media in 8 languages. They have a very sophisticated news operation that is functioning as formally as news, but it's not really news because it's a propaganda. And you see online the groups like the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign, that they feel free to post on Facebook chants for jihad, chants for genocide. But it's not only these grassroots organizations. You see it also from the bottom up down level, where you see professors at universities delivering the same messages. So the point here that if we look at education, it needs to be very clear that it's not only students and not only young people are threatening the fabric of our society. It's also professors, very senior professors, very senior educators, very senior people in different positions. Because, for example, we look at the case study of the universities. If we know that there are professors that are radical, obviously the students would do the same, right? So they would look at the leader or the professor as a role model, like all these cases that we saw recently. So social media has a very significant role in delivering these hate messages. And this is a problem.
Thank you, Amira. A friend of mine, she's a journalist, she's attending a conference on this particular issue, information and disinformation, at the European Parliament. And she said it is now beyond control. Apparently, Chinese and Russians have taken over. So education is critical. We have the education. The question is, how are we going to deliver it, and to whom are we going to deliver it? So I think identifying the right parties is also critical. So I have one last question, and then we'll do closing comments. In order for the implementation of the first stage of Trump's plan, how important is it that the Arab world, the countries who signed on, hold Hamas accountable? Without them, do you think it's a possibility?
The first stage of Trump's plan is talking about disarming Hamas and making basically the ground in Gaza safe for both communities, the Palestinians and the Israelis. The support of the international community is, of course, very, very important. The only thing that we need to remember here, that with the support of the Arab countries and with the support of the international communities, there is still a major obstacle, which is that under Trump's understanding of the first phase is the statement that Hamas must stay in the ground while they still needs to locate, for example, the dead hostages. There is still going to be a transition period. So we face a problem here that Hamas is now allegedly also might be rearming and not disarming. So in my opinion, looking beyond the stage that we are now, after like Trump wants to get, after the hostages, all the hostages would return to Israel, and after Hamas would ideally disarm, it would be disarmed and so on, then definitely support would be needed from the Arab countries, because we know that, for example, when I recently just talked with people from the Arab community, because my PhD was just the beginning of a long career, so I'm still in conversations with these communities, and we understand that this problem, like you all talk about, is a problem of the whole Muslim community, right? They feel they have to support the Muslim community, and we have here the problem of how do you support the Muslim community while facing these threats of Hamas.
Thank you so much. So what we have heard so far is that that the first Nakba was a political process. We have to look at the conflict without factoring that. Then the Sheikh spoke about Muslims educating themselves of their ignorance. That is very critical, and Anila also spoke to that fact, and the social media has to be curated and followed up. I'm going to just open it up for closing comments from Sheikh, Anila, and Farhana, and then we'll have you close us, Amira. What do you want the Muslim world to do? Yeah, Sheikh.
Yeah, once again, thank you so much. And I just want to leave you with two things. Number one, the social media platform, we talk about, the power it carries in terms of spreading misleading information. But it also provides a very good opportunity for people like us. So we need to compete. We need to be very active in them, and we need to compete, because if we don't, then the narrative will be one-sided. So we need to compete. That's number one. Number two, which is the most important thing of all, the Western world is terrified with the idea of implementing Sharia law. Now, Muslims, we are more terrified than even the Western world, because the Sharia law that these people are peddling and want the West to adopt, this is not Islam. This is the same hadith, fabricated hadith that we talked about. They regard women as second-class citizens, and every single thing that is anti-Islam is what they want to make law as Sharia law, but that's not Sharia law. So again, we need to use our platform to tell the West, what you're afraid of, we're afraid of it more, because it is completely anti-Islam. Perfect example, if you commit adultery, they will kill you. Nowhere in Islam where people should be killed because they commit adultery. If you change your religion, they should kill you. Nowhere in Islam where anybody get killed because they change their religion. You can be Muslim today, tomorrow Christian, next day atheist. Islam does not require you to be killed. And so many, women must have, what they call hijab on. Nowhere in the Quran where that is mandated. So these are the things that even when it comes to Muslim men having 4 wives, if you go to the ayah again, it talks about a particular group of orphans that have nothing but rely on pretty much the mercy of their guardians. He said that you can marry one up to 4 just as a mercy, but it is not a regular, you want to get married. So many components we put together as Sharia law is anti-Islam, and we need to be very vocal about it, so that what is real Islam is the Constitution of British, Constitution of the US, and Constitution of any other country, because that is the real Sharia law, not what they're peddling. So thank you so much for having me, and I'll be more than happy for us to continue on this. But let's use the same platform that they're promoting their anti-Semitism, anti-Western, anti-woman, anti-everything, to counter them so that they will not have it. And let me end with this. After 9/11, I worked with the intelligence office, the law enforcement, and they were showing us the sophistication of these radicalized and their competence in using technology. So I called a meeting. I said, we're going to create a media to compete with them, and we did. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheikh. Anila, your closing thoughts?
Well, I'm thinking about what's going to happen afterwards, right? What's going to happen now, the day after, as we say. But I do believe that we're not just speaking about this political entity that is going to govern Gaza, but we're talking about like a moral and an ideological reset. And then that rebuilding of trust. How do we build humanity, spiritual integrity within our own, community, to understand that there has to be the dismantling, not just of the rockets, the tunnels, but also that digital echo. I'm still, I was just flabbergasted with the anti-Semitism that I'm seeing, You wanted the ceasefire? You got it. Now you don't want the ceasefire. What do you want? So we've got, the glorification of violence has just permeated into the minds of a lot of our people, our children in America. And I'm not just talking about Muslim children. I'm saying this spread of disinformation, and it's going in the name of our faith, has to be a personal struggle for every Muslim, every human being with a moral compass needs to fight this, because I feel the research Amira has done tells us that we need to be stronger. There need to be many more of us, but they're not. And if I may add in my closing, that most of our platforms, from Instagram to Twitter to LinkedIn, we get banned because they don't want to hear us. We have our own problems of censorship, Amira, and that's what's hindering a lot of people. They get silenced, who are like us, want to come on social media and do what we're doing. And just because we're in this space for a long time, like Imam Saab said, since 9/11, we've become resilient. But there are many sitting on the sidelines who get silenced, ostracized. And I hope that the young generation of Palestinians who were born in England and are growing up, that diaspora that you live with and that you have been working on, that they're going to be different. I'm seeing, though, a ray of hope in the young Muslim generation that are seeing the millennials speak of violence and glorify it in the name of Islam. They're actually taking a back seat now. So there is a slight indicator of hope in our community as well. And I pray for peace and I pray for moral clarity for all of us.
Thank you, Anila. Farhana?
Thank you again for this enlightening session. We always learn every day. I would say, as a mother, it's my responsibility to teach my children right from wrong. I hope as a community, as families, we come together and teach humanity. That comes first. We have to look at all perspectives before judging. And that always should have been the beginning of first learning experience. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Farhana. Amira, give us a very hopeful thought and conclusions and what we can do in the Muslim world in particular.
I think that one point very important, terrorism, like we said, global war terrorism is very important to understand that Hamas in Gaza, the same way as Hamas in Europe and the US, should be, the problems of Hamas in this area should be tackled. Both because there are also both in Gaza and in Europe and the US, because there are also links and ties between these places. So there should be a very clear distinction between migrants arriving to the UK and Europe who are positive, and these migrants should be integrated into Western societies, whereas the extremists and the asylum seekers who come on bogus visas and so on should be excluded from Western societies. So I think this very clear distinction should be implemented. Another thing that we have to remember is with social media. Once there is social media messages, we have to remember that they are have been penetrated for many years into the offline arena. So if someone is saying online something, it might influence the radicalization on someone outside who is reading it, and then he can carry out or a suicide attack or glorify terrorism as a result. And in terms of social media, that's what I'm saying. It must be very clear that there should be more enforcement. It should be very clear that social media should be a safe space, the same as offline spaces. And another important thing is to remember that we talked about what is the situation here in the UK. And you talked about Mahmoud Khalil, for example, in the US. From my research, not only the PhD research, but the research that I'm doing since October 7th on radicalization in Europe, I found out evidence to the fact that, for example, extremists like Khalil are very much linked with extremists here. So there is this link, and we need to understand that the operation against terrorism therefore must be approached by communicating with both places together.
Thank you, Amira. So in conclusion, thank you, everyone. And we really appreciate your valuable time. I would like to end by saying logic is the enemy of hate. Logic is the enemy of racism. And logic is also the enemy of anti-Americanism and anti-Semitism. And there's no other substitute than for us today to build allyship and to build relationships and educate ourselves. Thank you, and we hope to see you next Friday at our next Friday forum. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.